the police station. 7:29. The report comes in. Now, the system, when it was reanalyzed, reported it according to what time? GPS time.
Objection, arguing facts, not in evidence.
Hold on. Overruled, he can argue inferences. Overruled.
This is the testimony of Mr. Green. GPS evidence, GPS time synchronized to the atomic clock. 8 hours difference. 8 plus 7, 15. Magic. Magic explained by the report. It comes into the police station. What time did it come in? 7:29. The purpose of this, Exhibit 362, wasn't magic. The purpose was to show you how far apart the shots were. That's the purpose. And that piece of magic correlates directly with the sounds from 3 different microphones. 3 different microphones that you heard the sounds from. It isn't that you couldn't hear the sounds. You heard the sounds. You know the microphones were working. And what were you told about the microphones? It's not like a string of Christmas lights. One goes out, the whole string doesn't go out. Microphone 2 was working perfect. You heard it. It picked up 14 shots. 11 at the beginning, a pause, and 3. Now what do we know about this gunfight, if you can call it a gunfight? We know that there were 11 shots at the beginning and 3 at the end, because Officer Gwynny ran off behind or by, he wasn't sure if he was behind it or by it, by the Chrysler that was across the street. And at the Chrysler that was across the street, they found 3 bullet casings. Three bullet casings behind that car. 3. So we have 11 here and 1 plus 3. Okay? We had 13 shots from Officer Goya, undisputed. There was no word about the fact that he didn't shoot 13 shots. Then we have the microphone picking up 1 more shot. It's not magic. Reality. See, this isn't faith-based hocus pocus. My faith in this situation is in you.
Objection, arguing personal beliefs, my take.
Let's be careful about that line of argument, please.
The faith in the system is in you, the jury, that you will have heard the evidence and that you'll sort through the claims of magic and that you'll see the reality. Perception is not always reality. Now, since I've been called man of the mantra, let me make another remark about me. Just using me as an example. If you look at me straight on, you perceive I might be a man with a full head of hair. But if you see me from a different angle, you might know that I'm slightly challenged. Perception depends on your point of view. Perception can be altered by your point of view and by the things that you want to believe based upon your own personal beliefs. The Officer Gordy cannot perceive of a situation in which he would have shot his partner. Nobody wants to perceive of that situation. Later, he's describing the situation, and he can't perceive that he might have fired that shot. But the fact is, there's no evidence to support all these other shots that he thinks he heard. We'll talk about Patsy and how reliable she was, but I'm sure that you remember her testimony. She had a real straight story when Mr. Martinez was asking her questions. And to me, she couldn't keep her story straight.
Judge, I'm arguing his beliefs to me.
Overruled.
You see, the state could have reconstructed this scene. They could have asked for a reanalysis of the shot spotter information. It's their system. It's Glendale's system. The reanalysis is included in the annual fee.
Objection, arguing facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
But for me to get the reanalysis, $5,250 and $600 an hour to get what they should have done. I did make statements to you, no. Statements that you saw that I made, I stand by. And I stand by that the evidence showed you that those statements are correct. We'll get into what was said in opening in just a minute. But what I did promise you in the opening was that I would show you hard scientific facts. I would show you that the hard evidence doesn't support this theory of the state. For example, this new theory that we just heard, that my client chased Officer Goyde over here someplace and fired straight on. I don't know where that new evidence comes from. What Mr. Swanepoel was asked was, is it a perpendicular line from here on Oregon across the street? Well, yeah, it's a perpendicular line. So if the shot was fired perpendicular to the wall, it might have been fired from over here. But what Mr. Swanepoel couldn't say was where the shot was fired from. He didn't know. Oh. Well, now I killed the system. Mr. Swanepoel did not say that the shot was fired from this position to this wall. He couldn't say that. Mr. Martinez just tried to make that inference, but Mr. Swanepoel didn't say that. He said if there was a shot perpendicular to a wall, it would have to accompany it. But what we know is that there was a bullet found under this tree. We know that there was a mark on this house that nobody tested. Mr. Swanepoel didn't test that. Neither did Mr. Polkowski, the state's expert. They weren't asked to test that. There was a bullet slug found under a tree with wood fiber on it. That's what we know about item 30. Item 30 wasn't tested for DNA by the state. They withdrew it. They gave it to the lab, they withdrew it. Don't test it. And why not test it? Because you don't test what you don't want to know. I promised you that I would show you the shot spotter picked up 14 shots. It did. You heard it. See, this isn't magic. You heard it. Compare notes when you go back there. Ask if there's anybody who only heard 13. Count them. Listen to it again. 14 shots were picked up by the system. I told you that the medical examiner found fragments in the head of Officer Hulsey when he was doing the autopsy. And first of all, let me say, I did not say one disparaging thing about Officer Hulsey. Not one time did I call him any of the names that have been accredited to me calling him. I did not disparage that young man's name once. Officer Hulsey was killed in a horrible accident. And that's what it was, a horrible accident. But I didn't call him names. The medical examiner said he saw fragments in the head. You saw the x-ray, you saw them. You asked questions about them. Could have just been shadows? No, they were metal fragments seen on the x-ray. You have a special instruction. Not given in every case, because they don't lose evidence in every case. That special instruction tells you what to do in the event that the state loses evidence. And in the event the state loses evidence, you don't give them the benefit of it. The benefit goes to the person that's supposed to receive the benefit of the doubt. And in fact, the instruction tells you that once you make that assumption to the benefit of the defendant, that might rise to a position where there is a lack of probable cause. I mean, a lack of reasonable proof. And where that proof is lacking, then you're entitled to find Bryan Hulsey not guilty. Simply based upon the state's lack of preserving the evidence that could have proven Bryan Hulsey not guilty. And the one thing that they didn't contradict is that those tiny little fragments can contain evidence. A tiny little fragment. This is not a fragment. This is not one of the fragments. This is simply a demonstrative piece. Give you an example of how big a 5mm fragment is. Pull down. Looks pretty big up on that screen. If you look in that envelope, you can see it, but it's tiny. But what did Mr. Swanepoel say you could do with that tiny little fragment? Cut it in half, and it would still have valuable evidence. Cut it in half again, it could still have valuable evidence on it. Tiny little fragments, tiny little things give valuable pieces of forensic evidence. DNA, we're told, you can't see it, but it gives us valuable evidence. Tiny little things can give us valuable pieces of forensic evidence. And if they were going to contradict it, they could, but they didn't. And let's talk about spear gold dot bullets for a second. Spear gold dot bullets fragment. And you know how we know? One hit, Bryan Hulsey, in the leg. And what was found in his leg? Fragments from a spear gold dot .40 caliber bullet. The same bullet fragmented in Bryan Hulsey's leg that they're now claiming couldn't fragment. And they threw those fragments away also. The instruction tells you that you can credit that disposal to Bryan Hulsey's credit, find him not guilty, based upon that alone. Mr. Hulsey has no burden of proof. He took an immense risk in allowing us to go after and pull out the scientific evidence and bring it here to you. He had no obligation to make any statements to any witness to you. The burden of proof lies 100% on the state of Arizona through its prosecutor's office. 100%. Bryan Hulsey didn't have to prove anything. He took a big risk in allowing us to show you this scientific evidence that they could have shown you, but they didn't. And it taken a fancy county smoke and mirror attack on this evidence. I ain't trying to show you how 7 or 8 pieces of bullet slug magically convert into 13 slugs that were fired from Officer Goydia's gun. I wasn't the one that brought up that piece of fancy counting. Don't be misled by the fact that ShotSpotter didn't get the spot right. Quite frankly, that isn't why they wanted the analysis the day after the event. See, Glendale asked for the analysis the day after the event. Why? Because they wanted to hear how many shots were fired. They wanted to see how many shots were fired, to see if it corresponded with the evidence from the scene. It did. They found 13 casings from Officer Goydia's gun. And they found 1 slug from Bryan Hulsey's gun. 1 slug that had no DNA on it, no tissue, nothing of any value. Glendale has used ShotSpotter since 2002 and renewed its contract, not every 5 years, not every 10 years, every 12 years, every year, 2002. They don't use and re-up with a system that they don't have confidence in. And in fact, we know that they're currently in the process of updating their system to the latest, greatest version. We know that computer systems upgrade. You don't leave your common sense behind when you go in and talk about these cases. When you go and talk about the facts of this case, you know that computers have improved over the course of the last 15 years. ShotSpotter continues to improve too. And they improved when we asked for a reanalysis. Their location was just as they said it would be, within 25 meters of the spot where the shots were fired. We showed you that analysis within 25 meters. We know the shots were fired on the corner. We know that. They were fired on the corner of 60th and Oregon. We know that. We're not looking using ShotSpotter to find where the shots were fired. We know where this incident happened. And when you look at Exhibit 379, which was the red dots from the first analysis, you see the address, 5939 West Missouri. And what's the explanation for the address? It's the whole lot. That's the address, and the whole lot is on Missouri. But the shots are actually found right here on 60th. So we asked, is it possible you got the shot location wrong? Because we can hear the shots, the timing's right, but it seems like the location's wrong. Now, I didn't sit down with an analyst and go through calculus to make sure that they triangulated it right second time. You remember the triangulation, with the triangulation, the fancy ways where they all intersected. And where they all intersected came down to a spot at this corner. So even though we already knew where the shots were, we now know that the reanalysis showed where the shots actually took place. Sensor 2 is in a different direction than sensor 11, which, if I could show you it, was over about, let's see, sensor 2 is here, sensor 11 is over here farther. This one's 250 meters away, sensor 11 was 512 meters away. okay? A little bit farther away. But the important thing about that sensor is in a different direction. Now, it didn't pick up the last 3 shots because something interfered with the sound waves, not with the science. Those last 3 shots were fired by Officer Goitia close to a wall. Remember, I did this with the expert, close to a wall that was behind him, with sensor 11 down the road, the sound reflecting off the wall and shooting out in a different direction. Now, some of the sound might have carried over the building, but we can't hear it. Doesn't mean that the 11 shots that it picked up didn't happen. Oh yeah, and about my declaration to you that the 11th shot is the shot that Bryan fired. It's the only shot that we hear a ricochet from. Now, if this courtroom again is the setup, right? That's the wall, all right? Back there is sensor 11. Officer Goitia is shooting towards you. Sensor 2 is over here. Bryan, down on his knees or laying on the ground after having been shot, somehow raises up and fires a shot, not at Officer Goitia, not where all the casings are, but down the road at a house, just fires off a random shot. And we hear, ping. The reason why sensor 11 picks up that sound, that ping, is because that shot's being fired in the general direction of sensor 11. Not magic, science. Sensor 2, if you listen to it, it doesn't pick up the ping. Because the sound waves from the ping are not heading towards sensor 2, they're heading towards sensor 11. But on sensor 2, if you listen really careful, at the end of the 11th shot, you're going to hear a, oh. You hear something. You'll hear something. You can listen to it. See, that's the science, not the magic. The state argues that the system is flawed. There's a difference between foolproof and fraud. The Glendale hasn't used the system for 12 years because it's fraudulent. Because it is completely a botched system. In fact, we know from the testimony of Mr. Green that the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office and the City of Glendale have used ShotSpotter to convict a man of first-degree murder. So they use it when it's convenient, and they don't use it if it doesn't show exactly what they want. We brought up the system with all of its warts so that you could see the benefits of the system. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Just because one part's bad, you don't throw out the whole thing. Yeah, 3, maybe 4 sensors weren't working properly. But Mr. Green even told you, as he listened to one of those sensors that was supposedly down, he could still hear sound. And he told you that there were 5 sensors that picked up 11 shots. He only illustrated here graphically 3. But 5 picked up the 11 shots. ShotSpotter isn't perfect. He didn't say it was perfect. He said that they guaranteed that they pick up 80% of the shots fired in an area. That's their guarantee. Now, when you hear it right. The microphones don't cut out every other shot. They don't cut out 20% of the shots. You heard it. The microphone was working. You could hear the tape. It picked up 14 shots. It was working. There is no information, no evidence, no suggestion on the visual portion of the audio graphics that suggest that there was any other shots fired. If there had been, remember what Mr. Green and I went through so that you would, he said, if there were other shots fired, you would generally see something where you would see part of a shot, like I'm showing you here in sensor number 2. You might see part of a shot, but you wouldn't see the whole thing. That's what would lead you to think, yeah, there were other shots being fired. No. No other shots being fired. See, it's the hocus pocus proof. It's the only thing that you could use to base a conviction on, or base a conviction that there was more than 14 shots. There's no evidence to that effect. Yes, there is 2 witnesses that made statements that you can't believe. Patsy had a great story, along with Mr. Martinez. Great story, man. It was never answered one straight. As soon as I started asking her questions, she couldn't keep a straight face. She couldn't give us a straight answer. It wasn't insulting the lady when I asked her if meth caused her teeth to rot. I know she had false teeth in. I asked her, she said, no, that didn't happen to me. I wasn't insulting her. I asked her if she knew that that's a common problem with meth. She said she knew it, but it didn't happen to her. What Patsy did say, and what was not contradicted, when I asked Patsy, didn't you tell one of the police officers that it could have been the one police officer who shot the other one? Read it to her right from her own transcript. She said, yeah. Yeah, that's what I said. If I had been wrong about what I was quoting her, we would have heard from the officer who took down the quotation. If I had misread the transcript, you'd have heard about it right then instantly. She said, yeah, it could have been the other officer, the one officer who shot the other officer. She didn't know. See, Patsy had this idea in her mind that she could either see through doors or that she saw through a crack. But Officer Boyd says there was no crack, the door wasn't open. And Patsy's head bobbing up and down more than a toy boat in a bathtub full of children. That logical, I mean, don't throw out your common sense. Shots start firing, your head's down, you're not going to peek up when shots are being fired. Head down until shots stop. And that's what she did. And then she got out of the car, but she couldn't remember where the body was. Because see, you see, she said the body was right behind the car. But we know it wasn't. We know it wasn't right behind the car. And we know that no shots were fired on the passenger side of the car. I think a lot of you picked up on that because she asked questions about that. Was there blood on the passenger side of the car? This is the passenger side of the car in front of me. Somebody gets shot, who the medical examiner says will have bled profusely and immediately. Where is he going to start bleeding? Why did he fall there? Because that's where he was shot. Where he was knocked out. And that's where he was knocked down. And that's where he bled profusely from. This was a horrible accident. A horrible accident. This isn't about somebody being dumb. This is about a horrible accident. Somebody saw a gun. Or perceived he saw a gun. When I asked Officer Goyde about getting out of the car, the whole getting out of the car scene, he gave us a different story than what we'd heard before. And I asked him if it was a different story. He admitted it was different. Because in one story, Bryan In one story, according to Patsy, Bryan just gets out of the car and just starts blasting. Okay, we've already talked about that. There's just nothing to back that up. Now, in Officer Goydia's first story told when he was at, I always forget the name of the place, when he was at the special location to take the officer. He told a story about Bryan backing out of the car, turning, and that as he turned, he then produced a gun, which Officer Goydia saw. And then he started running, and he outran the bullets that were whizzing past his ears. He ran to a spot, turned, and started firing. That's not the story we heard in court. It's a story that keeps on changing, keeps on evolving. Because if you can't conceive yourself doing something inconceivable, you're going to think about it. And you're going to go, well, this must have been what happened. This had to be what happened. This time, by that I mean when we were in court, Officer Goydia gave us a very detailed explanation that he'd never given before, how he pulled Bryan out of the car. He shuts the door, or the door is almost shut. He wasn't sure. And then he takes Bryan to the front of the car, where he's going to pat him down. And when he's at the front of the car, about to be patted down, he said that he grabbed Bryan's arm. Now, I didn't know what that meant, so I said, do you mean you tapped Bryan on the shoulder so that he'd turn around? No. Well, did you touch him and tell him to turn around? No. He volunteered. I grabbed him by the arm. Well, if you're not expecting somebody to grab you by the arm, you might shrug them off. Especially if somebody grabs you strongly by the arm and you're not expecting it. So if Bryan whirled with his hands up and a t-shirt on, and Officer Goydia, as he's whirling, sees a gun, could he have perceived hands and gun meant a gun in a hand? I don't know. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what happened. The story keeps changing. See, this whole now I'm up at the front of the car story, and then he brings out the gun again and starts firing that, and then we exchanged gunfire. Shots were being fired. Not one, multiple. But I'm going to say only two. Then remember how Mr. Martinez intimated that when Bryan was down here, that he fired a shot that hit this wall here. Remember? I'm saying, who's right across from here? What's right across from here? Who's right across from here? He kept asking everybody, who's right across from here? Intimating clearly that Bryan fired that shot that hit that wall. So now we've got, let's reduce this. Let's say he only fired 2 shots to start with. It's fire. And then he fired from his knee, and then he fired a bunch of shots, and then he fired over there at the wall. Oh, and let's not forget the new one, the perpendicular shot. So now we've got a minimum of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or more shots. 7 to 9 shots being fired by Bryan. I'm not trying to create a fancy count, but I don't know how many shots were fired. But here I know it wasn't 7, it wasn't 6, it wasn't 5. There are 4 empty casings in Bryan's gun. Empty casings, we were told, are a lot like fingerprints. You can see a fingerprint on a surface. You don't know when it was placed there. The revolver doesn't leave a mark, a date stamp, fires it around. But we don't know if that gun was loaded with 6 full loaded shots or not. We just don't know. I'm not going to say it was, I'm not going to say it wasn't. We don't know. But there were 4 empties, but only 1 slug. Only 1 slug was found. They said they searched in the area of this truck. I asked Detective Hawkins. Searched in the area of this truck. And the reason why I'm asking about that is because if Bryan's firing as Officer Goydia starts to run, we're going to see shots in the police cars, or we're going to see shots in these houses. Or maybe even houses down behind here. And look, nothing. There's nothing to corroborate their theory of where the shots were fired. There's nothing. There is a slug over underneath the tree. Item 30. That's the only slug they found. Now they searched east and west on the south side of Oregon. Of Oregon. They searched the grassy area on Oregon. I mean on 60th. They searched the other side of the street where there are big trees. Nothing. Interestingly, if they wanted to test their own theory, or even test my theory, if my theory is correct, shots were fired here, get Officer Hulsey here, because he thought Bryan was standing here, and the shot would have ended up here. He saw the rope. Rope went here. He didn't search north to the key. Why? Because you don't search where you don't want to find information. You don't test your theory. That's just going to give you what you want. One of the elements of both first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder is an intention. So we have to look at what evidence there was of intention. And at the scene, what did Officer Goydia tell us? Officer Goydia said that when he went up to the car to start with, pulled Nikki out of the car, everything was calm. And when he went and put Nikki in the car, everything seemed calm. Then when he came back, he said, when he was asking Bryan about the purse, and if Bryan said, could you bring his purse? He said Bryan was calm. And I asked him, I said, you see a lot of people that are uncooperative, right? And he goes, yeah, sometimes. I said, you recognize uncooperative behavior? Yes. Was Bryan demonstrating that? No. When he took Bryan out of the car, I asked him, was Bryan calm? He said, yeah, everyone was calm. Everyone was being cooperative. I said, well, did he get out too slow or too fast? He said, no, either one of those would have drawn my attention. So he wasn't getting out too fast or too slow. But yet, the testimony is now, once Officer Goydia grabbed Bryan's arm, that's when it went crazy. That's when Officer Goydia panicked. He saw something that made him panic. Officer Goydia is a police officer, and all police officers deserve respect. This isn't about not deserving respect, and it's not about not doing your job. But he was in a situation just a year and a half before this case in which He was confronting another man, and he told the man to get out of the car. And instead of getting out of the car, the man backed up his car and started coming at him. And what did he do? Officer Gray started firing at him. And he kept firing at him right to the point that he was run over. That doesn't mean he's a bad officer. He got run over by this guy. But it is a traumatic situation for anyone. It doesn't make it less traumatic because you're a police officer. He got run over. And what did he say? When I asked him about the Lopez case, we're talking 9 years later, his reaction was immediate. Oh yeah, that's another crazy guy that tried to run me over. And actually ran me. He ran me over and tried to kill me. I think were actually the words used. He ran me over and tried to kill me. It was still fresh in his mind 9 years later. And I don't blame him for that. Somebody ran me over, be fresh in my mind forever probably too. That doesn't mean he didn't suffer some type of post-traumatic stress disorder. We know that exists. Again, you use your everyday common experiences and knowledge when you decide these cases. You know that somebody who suffers a traumatic near-death experience is going to experience some trauma later. Segovia thought he saw a gun, and he thought that meant he was going to get killed, and so he took off running. That doesn't mean that anybody actually tried to kill him. Good place for a break?
I think it is. So we're going to go ahead and take our afternoon break. It'll take about 15 minutes. Until then, remember the admonition will take about 15 minutes.